Next up on the agenda is an overview of the NCI Equity and Inclusion Program. So Ned will be introducing the session, and then we'll hear from the co-chairs of 3 of the 5 working groups, and they are Dr. Paige Green, Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences, Dr. Leanne Bailey, Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities, and Dr. Tiffany Wallace, also from the Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities. And then we'll have a discussion following the presentation. So Ned?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so we started talking about this effort within the NCI probably last fall after events over the summer really sort of caused a groundswell of interest across the NIH and the NCI in really examining the areas where the NCI has the most equities related to the problems of structural racism. So that's the 3 groups I described of focusing on our cancer health disparities portfolio, on our efforts to develop a diverse workforce, and on looking at inclusive NCI culture. And so we created this administrative structure that I spoke about earlier today, and have now been working diligently for months to try and figure out how we can make things better. And I think the work of this is of these working groups and the steering committee has been really wonderful to be a part of this. I think the across the NCI there's just uniform enthusiasm to try and work in these areas, and it really feels like a different moment in time to me. We've done some communicating about the effort internally, but we wanted to get it to an advanced stage before we showed some of the progress and future plans to the joint boards today. So we are now going to have 3 presentations, and the first is going to be given by Tiffany Wallace, who is one of the co-chairs of the Cancer Health Disparities working group.
Thank you, Dr. Sharpless. It's great to be here today. As mentioned, my name's Tiffany Wallace, and I am a co-chair for Working Group 1, which is the working group that is focused in on enhancing research to address cancer health disparities. And today I'll be presenting on behalf of the other working group co-chairs, specifically Dr. James Dorshow and Dr. Warda McCaskill-Stevens. Next slide, please. So the overall purpose and the charge for our working group is really to develop and to prioritize research recommendations that will help us to better determine what the upstream precursors are to cancer disparities, and then to furthermore implement those research programs to ultimately eliminate disparities and promote health equity. So to do this, we propose to facilitate, in many cases, implement research activities that will help us develop initiatives focused in on advancing prevention, interventions, and implementation. Now, we are focused very broadly across the entire cancer continuum, and we're interested in advancing everything from prevention through treatment and survivorship. And members of our working group are diverse expertise, and we're focused in on research including basic and translational, all the way through to population sciences and treatment. Now, if you're following along with the Unite initiative, our working group most aligns with the N committee, which is also focused in on disparities and health equity. And we're working to stay connected with them and coordinate. We want to avoid any redundancy in our efforts and, if possible, find points for synergy. Next slide. So this is a very broad overview of what our goals and activities are as a working group. I'll take a broad approach at this, but then we'll talk a little bit more on specifics on how we're approaching these goals in our following slides. So in general, our first goal is really to take a little bit of a step back and do a landscape analysis of the field, and then identify some key diverse stakeholders to get input. And we anticipate that by doing this, we're going to better be able to understand where the current gaps are, where the opportunities are for research, and help to define our overall priorities. Our second goal is really to take that input and then develop and prioritize our research recommendations. And we anticipate that a lot of the input for this will come from our landscape analysis and stakeholders, but also from the members of our working group and those at NCI. And then our third goal will be to take those recommendations and to promote and implement those activities. And again, I'll talk a little bit about how we're approaching this on our next slides. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that we did as a working group was to come together and identify some immediate actions. We understand that a lot of the work that we are charged with doing is going to take some significant time and effort, but we wanted to get to work right away and identify some things we could do now. And so one of the first things that we did was publish requests for information seeking stakeholder input. So we currently have 2 RFIs out. The first focused in on how to better enhance cancer disparities research. And the second one is more aligned with our working group 2, which you'll hear from in just a minute, trying to seek ways to improve workforce diversity. So these are currently out. We encourage you to take a look. If you have a response, to please submit it. As a note, these RFIs are distinct to NCI. So even if you submitted a response to the Unite Initiative's call just a few months ago, we encourage you to consider submitting a response to us, as we are staying connected and avoiding any redundancy. Another activity we're involved in is developing a summit with multi-stakeholders that's focused in on ways to better increase inclusion and equity in cancer clinical research and clinical trials. I don't have too many details to share today, as we're very much still in the planning phase, but we do anticipate that there may be a virtual or a hybrid event possibly later in the fall. Next slide. So in addition to being focused on advancing research throughout the extramural research community, we're also interested looking internally here at NCI within the intramural research program. We want to see if we can expand the amount of cancer disparities, minority health, and health equity research that's ongoing here. And so we teamed up with the Center for Cancer Research, CCR, the Division of Cancer Epidemiology and Genetics, DCEG, and a trans NCI activities committee called CDAC, the Cancer Disparities Activities Committee, to develop some trainee awards. And so we had both postdoctoral fellowships as well as research project awards for 1 to 2 year projects. And again, it's the hope that this will expand the amount of research ongoing here within NCI's intramural program. Next, we teamed up with a trans NCI working group that's been working on a concept actually for quite some time. This is led by CRCHD. I'm not going to talk too much about it because you're actually going to be hearing from Dr. Leanne Bailey tomorrow as she presents this concept. But it's called Connecting Underrepresented Populations to Clinical Trials. And the purpose is really focused in on outreach and education interventions that are designed to help increase referrals, accrual, and retention, hopefully, of underrepresented populations into NCI clinical trials. Lastly, we know that there's a lot of activities ongoing at NCI currently that have been pretty successful in advancing disparities research, and so we propose to identify some of those. If they're ending, reissue them, perhaps even reimagine them in some cases, and so we're currently in the process of doing that. Next slide. So I'll take the final few slides just to review some of our ongoing and future activities. As I mentioned, we're interested in doing a landscape analysis, and this is underway. I want to make a comment that this is not a comprehensive analysis, but instead we're focusing in on some key publications on different topics, all related to disparities, and all of which provided recommendations for how to move the field forward and looking to see what overlaps and what's unique and what might inform our priorities and agenda. I also wanted to make the point that this is not a portfolio analysis of funded NCI research. Those efforts are being done elsewhere within NCI, as well as part of the NIH's Unite committee activities, and we're staying connected with that. As far as some research activities, some examples of what we're working on now includes teaming up with the Division of Cancer Prevention is working with the Division of Cancer Diagnosis and Treatment to conduct a survey and an analysis looking at how telemedicine is being used in NCI clinical trials, particularly both before and after the COVID-19. We all know that telemedicine usage has increased and changed in response to this pandemic, and we're interested in seeing what were some lessons learned and how telemedicine may be useful in increasing health equity in cancer clinical trials. Next, we are working with the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences here at NCI to further advance research and cancer control, particularly in persistent poverty areas, where we recently released a notice that's soliciting PO1 applications. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, so next slide. If you're not familiar in persistent poverty areas, the definition for a persistent poverty area is a county that has poverty area rates that are 20% or more in the US Census data from 1980, 1990, and 2000. And it's well documented that individuals facing persistent poverty have worse cancer burden, worse mortality and morbidity. Currently, the current class of characterization, this is data from the USDA, includes that over 10% of US counties are considered persistent poverty areas. You can see the map here. Most of these fall within the rural South. Now, importantly, we're working further with the USDA to expand this definition to make get a little bit more granular than the county level and use the census tract level data. And when we do that, I don't have that data here today, but it does seem that each of the 50 states, including Washington, D.C., has persistent poverty areas. Next slide. So we've been working, DCCPS has had a number of supplement programs. The first was targeting R01 grants. That was in 2020. 6 awards were made through that call. There was another supplement program this year targeting P30 Cancer Center support grants, again, designed to advance research in persistent poverty. Those awards are still pending, possibly in September. And as I mentioned, now we have the PO1 solicitation that's out. Again, hoping to attract these larger multidisciplinary teams doing collaborative research to really address the burden of individuals in persistent poverty areas by advancing prevention and cancer delivery strategies. Next slide. So looking ahead, as I mentioned, we are coordinating and synergizing across NCI and NIH. I've mentioned our connection to the END committee of the Unite. We're also working with ongoing activities committee within NCI called the Cancer Disparities Activities Committee, chaired by Diane Palmieri and myself. And we're also seeking solicitation from NCI for innovative ideas, as well as the extramural community. Right now, if you have anything to share, we think the best way to do that is to submit a response to the RFIs that are out. Next slide. So to end, I wanted to just briefly introduce you to the other working group members from Working Group 1. As you can see, there's a lot of expertise spanning all of the divisions, offices, and centers at NCI. They're very passionate and motivated to address disparities, and we want to thank them for their efforts up till now and look forward to moving ahead in the future. At this point, next slide, I think I'm handing it back to Dr. Sharpless to introduce Working Group 2, and I'll be available for questions.
Sure, thank you, Tiffany. I think we'll hold all the questions till the end. I also, her presentation reminds me, I wanted to make a point that I've asked all the speakers to sort of talk about how the NCI effort relates to the greater NIH initiative called Unite. Some of these problems are trans NIH problems, some are better solved with the NCI, so we work closely with that effort. Next, I think we have Leanne Bailey, Dr. Leanne Bailey from CRCHD, talking about the Working Group 2 efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Sharpless. Good afternoon, and we are delighted to be participating in this joint board meeting and to share some of the activities of Working Group 2, or ensuring diversity of thought and background in the cancer research workforce. My name is Leanne Bailey, and I will be presenting today on behalf of our work group and my fellow co-chairs, Drs. Glenn Merlino and Susan McCarthy. Next slide, please. Our work group is focused on enhancing NCI's efforts to develop a diverse and balanced cancer workforce, both intramurally and extramurally. Our efforts will focus on enhancing the current research and training efforts at all levels to not only retain, but also sustain a viable and diverse workforce. We're also interested in new approaches to support and sustain the equal representation of underrepresented groups throughout the research training pipeline. As was previously alluded to, there's a larger effort called Unite at NIH, and we are working with Subcommittee E of this effort, and it's focused on the extramural research ecosystem. Their activities consist of a larger effort, specifically to change policy, culture, and structure to promote workforce diversity across NIH. Next slide, please. Our work group has several goals: to not only devise but implement strategies to sustain the gains that have been made, but also to increase the number of investigators from underrepresented groups in cancer research at all the levels, from early training to leadership positions. Specifically, one of the key gaps or challenges that our group focuses on is the lack of the number of application awards for underrepresented groups. This challenge has been long-standing and has been documented by Ginther, Nakamura, and others, that there are significant differences in award probability based on race and ethnicity. As a matter of fact, just last week, you might have seen the recent commentary that was published in Cell by Dr. Collins and colleagues that further emphasizes the disparity in NIH R01 funding for grant application and funding rates among these groups. Next slide, please. Diversity in the R01 pool has been a substantial challenge at NIH and NCI for many years. It's not going to be easy to overcome, nor is it straightforward. The underrepresented group R01 problem is an old and intractable problem that NCI is taking active steps to tackle. Here we see the demographics of NCI's FY20 NCI R01 applicants in the top row and the awardees in the bottom row. This data highlights two challenges. The top row concerns the applicant number. As you can see, there is substantial opportunity and need to increase the application number from underrepresented groups, such as Black or African Americans and Hispanic Latinos. The bottom row addresses the funding gap for these underrepresented groups, which leads to a lower representation in NCI awardees compared to the overall applicant pool. Next slide, please. So there are multiple underrepresented groups among the NCI R01 principal investigator pool, including Black and African Americans, Hispanic Latinos, American Indian or Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. These challenges have persisted over time. We highlighted one of the most dramatic examples here, in that the percentage of Black or African American awardees has remained stable at 1% over the last decade. The funding gap is especially apparent for this demographic. And again, we really understand that this R01 funding challenge is a global problem for NIH and NCI. There are numerous efforts that are ongoing at NCI, and Working Group 2 seeks to address this problem with a new program. Next slide, please. So we understand that this is a very large problem. And in order to begin to address this challenge, we have proposed a small but significant step to promote the transition of extramural and intramural early career investigators to independent investigators. And it's one of our immediate actions. It's titled the Early Investigator Advancement Program. The program components consist of monthly webinars for education and engagement, grant application preparation and technical assistance, as well as the connection and linkage to mentors and the expansion of professional networks. It also includes a virtual hub for communication and resources. And where possible, we would like to be able to make the resources available to the public. The outcomes for each participant are listed and include the completion of an R01 grant proposal by the end of the program, and also, again, becoming a larger part of a cadre of peers with similar career goals, the engagement with mentors, as well as the development and understanding and awareness of what FOAs are currently available. This is going to be a program that's going to encompass about 20 participants per cohort, and we anticipate one cohort per year. Next slide, please. Our ongoing efforts include, again, collaborating with Unite and it consists of webinar, summit, and meeting planning. Unite is addressing a broader scope that encompasses topics like peer review, program engagement, as well as a variety of other factors. We intend to be tightly connected to the other working groups, especially Work Group 4 for metrics and evaluation. So in addition to the Early Investigator Advancement Program, Working Group number 2 is developing the next set of activities and programs for review by the Equity Council. One of which that is currently in development is the consideration of perhaps a diversity R01. We really do want to hear from you, NCI, and the larger cancer research community. The group wants to hear about and identify other models and efforts that are ongoing across NIH and perhaps at your institution as well as the community, so as to not reinvent the wheel, but to augment activities and increase impact. For example, you just heard about the request for information that was issued by Work Group 1 about workforce diversity and cancer health disparities research. We sincerely hope that you will participate and respond, because we all need to work together. Next slide, please. There are some exciting efforts that have been launched recently. I'd like to touch briefly on the first program or the first initiative. It's the Faculty Institutional Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation Program. And this is a trans NIH program that's supported by the Common Fund that aims to enhance and maintain cultures of inclusive excellence in the biomedical research community. Inclusive excellence refers to cultures that establish and sustain scientific environments that cultivate and benefit from a wide range of talent. The program also seeks to have a positive impact on faculty development, retention, progression, and eventual promotion, as well as the development of inclusive environments that are sustainable. There's been substantial NCI involvement and leadership in the development of this initiative, and we are very much looking forward to the outcomes. Next slide. At NCI, leadership is examining activities that reflect diversity of thought with regard to how it is we might increase diversity across the Institute. There are efforts that are ongoing, such as the R21 being reissued, and it's a continuation of an NCI program to enhance the diversity of the pool of the cancer research workforce by recruiting and supporting eligible investigators from groups that are underrepresented. It bridges investigators who have completed their research training and may need just a little bit of extra time to develop a larger research project grant application. Select pay. NCI has always had procedures in place to select grants to pay out of rank order. NCI uses a holistic approach based on a variety of considerations when deciding whether to award select pay. What is new is the examination of the current language with the intent to refine and clarify the policy. The Specialized Programs of Research Excellence, or SPORE programs, have funds available for development research project awardees from underrepresented groups. It's an extra $25K in direct costs per year that can be requested for a developmental research project that's led by an investigator from the aforementioned groups. And then lastly, the Office of Cancer Centers is very interested in encouraging diversity in cancer center membership and leadership, and is working on revising the Cancer Center support grants to encourage diversity. Next slide, please. And lastly, in summary, this slide displays the Workgroup 2 members and their representation across NCI. They are truly a talented, committed, and passionate group of folks that are tirelessly advancing this effort, and we'd like to thank them for their service and contributions today. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Sharpless.
Great, thank you so much. And now we have a third presentation before some discussion, and that is from Dr. Paige Green.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm honored to serve as co-chair with Shannon Bell and Satish Gopal of the Promoting an Inclusive and Equitable Community at NCI Working Group. Sorry, my slides, are they up and visible? Thank you. Now, we are the third working group in the NCI Equity and Inclusion Program. I will focus on our Institute's internal efforts to establish and sustain cultures of inclusive excellence within NCI. So next slide. So within the walls of our institute, we seek to build and sustain scientific and administrative cultures of excellence that are inclusive, equitable, supportive, and reflective of the diversity of the U.S. population. Now, broadening our inclusion, engagement, and valuation of diversity arising from lived experience and social identity promises to positively impact our service as the federal government's principal agency for cancer research, training, and information dissemination activities within the United States and globally. Thus, our working group strives to enhance the diversity of our internal scientific and administrative workforces through the recruitment, retention, recognition, and promotion of individuals from otherwise underrepresented and marginalized groups. Next slide. Our working group goals are to assess our internal diversity, equity, and inclusion landscape using available qualitative and quantitative data, engage NCI leaders, staff, and advisors in social and organizational change processes that are safe, productive, and accountable, and use those processes to identify and implement recommendations that will create an internal structure and culture that thrive on diversity, equity, and inclusion excellence, which is achieved through a transparent, accountable, and sustained commitment to realizing that ideal. Next slide, please. To realize our goals, we must examine how structural racism shapes the state of our institute. Our working group has identified, collected, and analyzed available workforce and workplace experience data. Our initial analyses have focused on our internal full-time equivalent workforce due to available data resources. However, we acknowledge the need to understand the experiences of our contractors and our training fellows similarly, and we're working to identify appropriate data sources. Now, over the following 5 slides, I will share highlights from the analysis of data obtained and synthesized from the NIH Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the NIH Scientific Workforce Diversity Office, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, and the NIH Exit Survey. To promote awareness, transparency, accountability, and engagement with our internal community, we presented this snapshot at the June 3rd NCI Town Hall, and we plan to share updated results NCI-wide later this summer. Now, to orient you to our results, and for the sake of time, when referring to Black and African American and Hispanic Latinx groups, I will use the terms Black and Hispanic respectively. Next slide, please. We begin by observing that the distribution of NCI's internal workforce differs from NIH's internal workforce and the broader U.S. civilian labor force. Among our federal employee workforce, 3% identify as Hispanic, 13% identify as Black, 25% identify as Asian, and 58% identify as white. So compared to NIH, NCI has a lower percentage of federal employees who identify as Black and a higher percentage of federal employees who identify as Asian. Relative to the civilian labor force, federal employees who identify as Hispanic are underrepresented, and federal employees who identify as Asian are overrepresented at NCI. Next slide, please. Of note, representation of scientists that identify as Black or Hispanic is strikingly low for senior positions within our intramural research program. As shown on this slide, 2% or less of senior scientists, clinicians, or investigators within the NCI intramural research program identify as Black or Hispanic. Next slide, please. Now, this slide focuses on approximately 2/3 of the NCI workforce employed in the 5 most common administrative and scientific positions. Here we observe that the distribution for Black staff across administrative and scientific positions is different from the NCI workforce distribution overall, in which 19% of staff is employed in administrative positions and 81% of staff is employed in scientific positions. In contrast, 64% of staff who identify as Black are employed in administrative positions and 36% are employed in scientific positions. Moreover, although not reflected on this data slide, we observe distribution disparities by pay grade for Black staff relative to NCI's internal workforce. Next slide, please. These data are from the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey administered annually to federal government employees by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. The survey measures workplace perceptions and employee engagement and motivation. Responses 65% and higher are considered positive. Now, in 2018 and 2019, we observed that employees perceive NCI positively overall. However, relative to white respondents, Black and Hispanic staff responded less favorably to questions about whether NCI's policies, programs, and supervisors support diversity and inclusion. Next slide, please. Finally, the experience of a different NCI climate appears to extend to those who choose to leave NCI. Among NCI staff who completed the NIH exit survey between 2018 and early 2021, former Black and Hispanic staff responded less favorably to questions about receiving adequate training to perform their jobs, their positions making full use of their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and receiving clear guidance on how to advance and excel professionally within NCI. Furthermore, Black respondents were less likely to recommend working for NCI to others. Next slide, please. So against the background of today's reckoning with our nation's history of structural racism, an opportunity emerges to create diverse, equitable, and inclusive cultures of excellence. Our success will broaden our capacity to lead, conduct, and support the cancer research enterprise. As you can see, Dr. Collins and Dr. Sharpless are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion paradigm shifts within our scientific and administrative workforces and in biomedical research overall. We, the working group, commit to working with NIH and NCI leaders, staff, and advisors to realize and sustain the change we want to see within NCI and the cancer research enterprise we are charged to lead on behalf of our nation. So where do we begin? In addition to the inward-facing landscape analysis, we've received support to implement a few additional immediate actions. Please note that these are initial actions. Considerably more substantive work is needed to build a diverse community with inclusive and equitable social norms at NCI. Next slide. Agencies use the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey results to build on strengths and improve challenge areas. So relative to the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute employees consistently report higher positive perceptions of their leadership, their intrinsic work experience, their environment, and the opportunities to contribute to our mission. This is great news. However, only 59% of respondents indicated confidence that results would be used to further improve NCI. To address this concern, we are expanding the transparency of results by posting response rates for each NCI work unit with at least 10 respondents, and we're posting that to the NCI intranet, and then also disseminating work unit specific results to NCI supervisors and managers. This year, supervisors and managers must share, discuss, and act upon results with their staff, and implementation support is available through our Office of Workforce Planning and Development, which is directed by our working group co-chair, Shannon Bell. For the first time this year, we will examine and share survey results by available demographic characteristics. This is a significant development, and it will help us further understand staff perceptions, motivations, and engagement by crude measures of social identity. We anticipate posting that additional data to our intranet by the summer. Next slide. We have refined and will pilot a new diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit for NCI supervisors and intramural research program investigators this summer. The toolkit was created to improve supervisor and staff awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion expectations, and to support dialogue on bias, exclusion, and racism in the biomedical research field. The toolkit is evidence-informed and closely aligned with NIH's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Resources. The first training for NCI facilitators will occur this month, and we will pilot the toolkit with NCI supervisors, principal investigators, and staff this summer. Next slide, please. On June 9th, we launched the Trans NCI Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Speaker Series. This endeavor complements the toolkit by bringing notable diversity, equity, and inclusion organizational change experts to NCI to share their perspectives with leaders and staff. The NCI community is encouraged to attend those lectures, participate in the extended question and answer discussion periods, and most importantly, to nominate speakers to the series. Next slide. So moving forward, we will partner with our leadership, staff, and advisors to identify, implement, and evaluate short and long-term strategies to achieve transparent, accountable, and sustainable structural and cultural change within NCI. Community investment and engagement are critical, and we encourage any member of our community to submit feedback, ideas, concerns, and questions by email and during upcoming division, office, or center events. Today, I provided just brief highlights of our initial landscape analysis. However, updated results with deeper explanations will be presented by webinar this summer to our internal community. And we will host listening, question, and engagement sessions focused on the analyses and how the results can inform our efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion within our internal community. Secondly, we will leverage activities and resources of extant NCI communities such as the Diversity Task Force and the Workplace Civility Committees. Moreover, we welcome the opportunity to learn of and leverage best practices arising from your efforts to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes within the scientific and administrative workforces at your institution. We will coordinate with Unite and implement recommendations to build organizational structures, systems, and policies that create and sustain normative cultures of diversity, equity, and inclusion excellence within NCI, NIH, and the larger scientific communities. Next slide. Next slide. Oh. Go back one, thank you. To close, we offer our vision for an inclusive and equitable internal NCI community. It is an NCI where all employees value diversity, equity, and inclusion as guiding principles. It is an NCI where all employees practice a culture that fosters diversity, equity, and inclusion with authentic intention, resulting in sustainable progress towards accountable yet aspirational benchmarks. And it is an NCI where all employees are engaged, respected, valued, and recognized equitably for their contributions to our mission. Next slide. So on behalf of NCI leadership, I conclude by thanking the dedicated members of our working group. They have provided remarkable vision, leadership, and support for the work shared with you today. Our liaison with NIH efforts to eliminate organizational structures, systems, and policies that perpetuate exclusion and inequity based on race is facilitated through 4 of our members doing double duty as Unite committee members. With that, I thank you for your attention and we welcome your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all 3 speakers for terrific presentations. I also want to thank the other working group chairs who did a lot of work on this, and you can see it's a large number of individuals on these various working groups. It's really a trans NCI effort. Also, as I mentioned earlier this morning, this afternoon, there were 2 other working groups. There's Working Group 4, which is a systemic tracking and evaluation working group co-chaired by Doug Lowy and Michelle Bennett, and then Working Group 5, which is communications outreach for equity activities, and that's co-chaired by Peter Garrett, Angela Jones, and Anita Lindy. I did not ask them to give presentations today in the interest of time, but their work is to support the entire effort across the NCI with important things like metrics and tracking of our efforts, and as well as communicating our efforts. The other point I'd like to make before we take some questions is, as I hope was made obvious by the already implemented immediate actions and the near-term plans, solving these problems is going to be difficult and will require the commitment of new resources. And that has already begun. So we have really realize that it's not enough to just sort of talk about these problems, but we will actually have to use funds and use our authorities to try and address them. And I hope that is clear in the presentations thus far, and I'd be happy to talk more about that specifically if there are questions. So with that, let's turn it over to questions, and maybe Scott, I'll let you preside over the Q&A session, please.
Sounds good. Cheryl, you want to jump in with the first question? Cheryl Wilman.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hebert, and thank you, Dr. Sharpless, Dr. Wallace, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Paige. I thought your presentations were outstanding. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if we have a bunch of people not muted, but that's better. Thank you. Anyway, I thought your presentations were outstanding. And Ned, I just want to congratulate you for taking these issues so seriously. I know that the NCI has really done that increasingly over the years, and I think these presentations were really thoughtful. So my question perhaps is best directed to Dr. Wallace and Dr. Bailey. It's a little unfair, but several of us are sitting on, several members of the BSA and NCAB are sitting on an AACR task force that are writing the 2022 sort of state of the nation in cancer health disparities. And Ned will want to interact with you and a lot of your team for data and comments, as you know. And several of us are on AACR's disparities and DEI task forces as well. And we had very long meetings last week, and we came to a challenging discussion point, which is how does the NCI circumscribe its investments in what is a horrendous problem that isn't just about research in health and health equity and disparities, but all of us realize that cancer health disparities aren't going to be overcome if we don't deal with economic disparities, socioeconomic disparities, racial justice, and social justice issues. So this problem sort of becomes so consuming that it almost seems, how can we actually have an endpoint? And so what I want to get at is, how do we think about that when we structure grants? So the example I gave was, tribal health disparities, where the Indian Health Service has a $6 billion budget, but their budget probably should be $40 billion if they really met the need. Or where Pueblo homes and Navajo homes, 30% don't have drinking water and electricity. These are such fundamental social and economic disparities that they set a bar to achieve health equity so high that it's hard to overcome. And so, what we were struggling with, Ned and Tiffany and Leanne, in that report is, how do we put the context of the research we want to do at the NCI or the mission we want to address at AACR in the context of these massive, much larger disparities that probably are going to be hard to impact through grants we might do with you. So what we got to talking about, are there ways we partner with other agencies? Are there ways that we do advocacy to try to deal with these challenges in parallel? So again, I said that's a bit of an unfair question, but I think it framed how tough the discussion was for us, Ned, to figure out how we draw that circle. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, these are obviously really challenging issues, and I thought you summarized the problem and our thinking on this area really well. Obviously, the budget of the NCI doesn't allow us to fix some of these societal problems that are much larger than any single federal agency could take on. I think our real work here, we feel, is to understand these and sort of try and cancer disparities always turns out to be so interesting. When you really look at those, what causes a disparity in a specific disease, it's always multifactorial and complicated, and there are some things that are more amenable to solution than others. And so really sort of figuring that out is a big part of the NCI research emphasis here. So I will let Dr. Wallace try and explain to you how we think about cancer health disparities in this larger context. I think also it would be good to have Leanne Bailey weigh in as well, because of part of this is a workforce issue. We want to develop a scientific workforce that reflects the American public. And so Dr. Bailey, Dr. Wallace, why don't you guys give that a try?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have an answer, because it is a complicated question. But I do agree that we need to think bigger. We can't think about addressing disparities in the same way that perhaps we've thought about previously We need to think multidisciplinary approaches. We need to think beyond traditional thoughts, look at more upstream precursors that maybe we haven't focused on enough in the past. Structural racism has always been recognized, but whether or not it's been prioritized previously, is something we're looking at now. You mentioned partnerships. I think that that's going to be key in trying to address this huge issue. So I also don't think I have a solution, but I think we were recognizing the problem and we see what's ahead. And this is what our working groups are kind of strategizing on to figure out more. So we'll think about it more. And if we do come up with some more substantial answers for you, Cheryl, we'll reach out.
May I bring up one issue?
Could Dr. Bailey respond? And then I'd love to hear what Leanne has.
So thank you very much for the question. And what I can speak to is the fact that in order for us to address cancer health disparities and increase workforce diversity, specifically from underrepresented groups, we really have to take action now to train the next generation of competitive researchers in cancer and cancer health disparities research, right? They go hand in hand. And so given the fact that science is very much multidisciplinary and requires a variety of contributions from different sources and people, we really want to try to coalesce, right? And work together to be able to address these items now. There's been a lot of historical challenges, right? Structural racism, impediments over time. It's deplorable, the fact that 1% of RO1 funding for African Americans over 10 years is acceptable, right? And so I think working together, it will require the engagement of a variety of different groups, right? Like not just academic, but also community-based participatory research and clinical care. So I think we just really need to be realistic and tackle it and try to understand the disparities to figure out how to address it.
Otis?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that the biggest reason for the disparities really gets back to something that was mentioned earlier, and that is a substantial number of people don't get the prevention, screening, diagnosis, and treatment in high quality that all Americans should get. The other thing that we developed when I was at the American Cancer Society is, ironically, the largest disparate population in terms of people, because folks don't get adequate care, are white Americans. It's not really a race issue as much as it is a socioeconomic issue. And the NCI, I think, has been very good at doing work to say what I just said is true. I don't know if that work has been publicized as much as it could be. And there have been times when it probably was not a good idea to publicize it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Otis, can I want to thank Otis for making a point that the NCI has been working on this area for a long time, and we have a very substantial portfolio in cancer health disparities that I'm really proud of, and that is probably worth mentioning that this may be one of Dr. Croyle's last joint board meetings, and Bob Croyle has been a real innovator and thinker about this for a long time, and given that we might not have an opportunity to recognize Bob so much in the future, we should point out that it's really thoughtful things that he's been directing the NCI in this area for a long time. So, but that doesn't mean that it's not a fair question to say what could we do differently or better in addition, and certainly these problems still persist. And so I think that it's a tough, as Cheryl's introduction led us to believe, it's a tough thing.
Thanks, Sam. We have a ton of questions in the chat, and we've only got 8 minutes, so we need to go through these as quickly as possible. Electra Paskett has a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. I really want to thank all the presenters. Those were really stellar presentations and really exciting initiatives. And thank you, Dr. Sharpless, for directing this so well. I just want to make a comment, Dr. Wallace. I hope that you're aware that the NCAB subcommittee, the ad hoc subcommittee on population science, epidemiology, and disparities is going to convene an ad hoc working group that is going to advise on strategic approaches and opportunities for research on cancer among racial and ethnic minorities and underserved populations across the continuum. And I believe that this ad hoc working group can work very closely with your group to identify the areas where there are holes for research in various minority and underserved populations.
Thank you, Dr. Muscat. Yes, we are aware, we are staying connected, and actually Dr. Castle, who will be a great liaison between the two efforts, is a member of our working group as well as leading the NCI's efforts there. So thank you for pointing that out, and we are aware, and we definitely will be staying informed.
Thank you so much. Kevin Shannon's next.
Yeah, I just had a comment on Dr. Bailey's excellent presentation, and that is, I think many of us who've thought about these issues and have been trying to work on them in different extramural locations have noticed that the attrition from the pipeline, which I've talked about before with respect to women in MD, PhDs and physician scientists, but this is even worse for diversity, for diverse young investigators. And so I would really encourage your office to go back to medical school, to MSTPs, to T32s. You know, trying to get early stage investigators to write R01s is great, but you need to get them to the place where they can write an R01. And there just aren't very many people in the KOA pool or in similar pools, the K99, R00 pool. And I would for sure really try to look at the KOA, R00, K99, the T32s, the MSTPs, the NCI one-year program for undergrads. We just got to get more people into the pipeline earlier and then try to keep them there. I just think that if we limit this to people who are sort of in that transition where they're ready to write an R01, we've kind of lost the war already. We just don't have enough people who are getting to that place.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that insightful comment. And actually, the Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities has the CURE program, which is the continuing umbrella of research experiences. And we actually offer support for students, believe it or not, as early as middle school now, with our Youth Enjoy Science program, all the way up until their first faculty appointment. So these are all competitive, independent opportunities, and it really supports a continuous career development, as well as, you know, focusing in on some of the areas that you touched upon. So I would really encourage everyone to have a look to see how it is the center is supporting diversity with that regard. We also have institutional opportunities as well. So we appreciate that, and we are understanding that it's critical to reach these students in the early part of the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you might consider is sending some notifications out to the cancer centers and to the SPOR directors that we really are interested in funding graduate level students, early stage investigators, clinicians, medical students, anywhere we can get money out the door to help African American, Hispanic, and other underrepresented people in the pipeline. I think it's going to be a good investment. Just as an anecdote quickly, in our SPOR, Luis Parada was saying, well, we really should spend some of this money on, you know, people in training. And of course, the SPOR program, we can't use developmental funds for somebody who doesn't have a faculty appointment. So our hands are tied. We want to do something, we can't do it because of the rules.
Thanks, Dr. Shannon.
Thanks, Kevin. Peter Adams, that question.
Yeah, so I think the data that was presented are both shocking and totally unsurprising. And I want to build a little bit on what Cheryl said. At this year's ASCO, Lori Pierce, in her presidential address, I think it was one of the most impactful presidential addresses I've heard in many years. And it focused on institutional racism, her own journey, as well as the founding member of ASCO, Jane Wright. And if you haven't seen it, I would encourage everyone to listen to it. My question is this: as these efforts move forward, you heard from Cheryl and AACR, their efforts at ASCO, there are a lot of people appropriately beginning to start to devote major energy for this. As you move forward, I think efforts to reach out to the other organizations to see really who's going to be in the best position to take on what is going to be a multidimensional problem would be helpful. I know it's not easy. We're still very much at the beginning of this, but I certainly applaud the efforts you're taking within NCI and encourage additional outreach because the problem is obviously quite widespread.
Yeah, I think the point is well taken that partnership will be key. There are certain restrictions on what the NCI can't do where I think partners could be very, very valuable. Dr. Croyle has something in the chat box along those lines, pointing out that there's been some challenges in the past. But what I think has been very encouraging is that we have all these potential partners are coming to us saying we want to do something. I mean, there's this real sense with many of the large advocacy organizations and other research organizations that we work with that the time is now to do something. And so I really appreciate the comment.
Fantastic. I think Victoria Sewald will have to get the last question in here as we're, Vicki, are you?
Yeah, so I want to go and echo Leanne's comments about the success of the CURE program. I've been a mentor for many successful CURE investigators. One thing I want to point out as a sort of practical thing is that we have a huge disparity in the ability to write. And undergraduate education and graduate education does not remedy this, neither does medical school. And so the problem is that investigators, underserved investigators, are having to go write grants without the necessary tools. And so I think one effort should be invested in developing more creative writing strategies to teach new investigators, particularly underserved investigators, how to write. We've done this, and I've been very successful in getting our new investigators R1 funding, but you have to use non-traditional approaches, and I think that there should be investment in this.
Fantastic. We're out of time, but Francis, do you want to make a quick comment?
Oh, okay. Very quickly. I just want to echo what Kevin said. For many years trying to deal with this problem, I think the pipeline is really critical. And my time at MD Anderson in Houston and now at Duke, there are several just outstanding minority institutions, but there is really no mechanism or incentive actually to engage. Ned's time in Chapel Hill, I'm sure, Ned, you have your own experiences, but I think one way to improve the pipeline is really to incentivize, either by mandate or by resources, to make sure that these two groups really crosstalk and actually have a pipeline that allows some talented students who are interested in cancer or in science in general to gain from experience of these other major institutions. I think we've been talking about this in our SPOR, in our cancer center when I was associate director and so on, but really coming out with concrete plans that allow these two to crosstalk and bring in establish that pipeline, I think has been something that's been lacking. It would be great. The CURE program is great, but I think locally there's a lot that can be done that really is not being done.
Thank you so much, Francis. We are up against the break, so we need to take a break.